Hey guys, we are starting to talk about the War of 1812. We have been talking about the embargo and then the other act that was passed by the American government. Remember the Embargo Act? At first, it stopped trade between America and European nations, and then America was very upset with that because they said this isn't fair, towards us economically. We're not making money. We're not able to trade or export any of our goods, and so then the government took it back and they said, okay, we can trade with other nations, but we can't trade with Britain and France because remember, we were trying not to get involved in any war or conflict with them. Remember, we're still a very new nation and we are not economically established. Our military is not really established and we don't want to just get involved with those issues. And so we say we're going to not trade with Britain and France. But the main thing with that is we actually really needed to trade with Britain and France because they were, two of the main countries we were trading with at that time. And so although the American government thought they were doing the right thing, they weren't because it had negative effects on American merchants and our economy. So that's what we've been talking about. And then we're moving on to the War of 1812. We're talking about how we're starting the War of 1812. And two things that we touched on were the war heroes that came out of the War of 1812. So William Henry Harrison and then Andrew Jackson, they're both going to be war heroes from the War of 1812. And they are both going to become, they're going to be future presidents of the United States, which is amazing because they run on the fact that they helped win the war. And so William Henry Harrison is really well known for his work in the Battle of Tippecanoe. And so when he runs for president, his slogan is Tippecanoe and Tyler too, because his running mate is John Tyler. So that's interesting. Tippecanoe, the Battle of Tippecanoe, it's just like kind of rolls off the tongue. It's fun to say. So we'll learn about that later. We'll learn about his campaign for the presidency, but we are learning about him now in the Battle of Tippecanoe. Although we did, that was a success for America and we did win. It actually led to one of the main leaders of, a Native American tribe going and joining the British and fighting against us. So that was not something good for us from the Battle of Tippecanoe, although it was successful. And then the Battle of New Orleans, which we'll talk about more later, but Andrew Jackson is so well known for that. I mean, it's like his glory is for the Battle of New Orleans and his victory against the British there. But, and he uses that to rise to become one of the presidents of the United States. But what is so interesting is the Treaty of Ghent, which ended the War of 1812. It is actually signed, I think, 2 weeks before the Battle of New Orleans. And so, word had not gotten down yet. They didn't know. And Andrew Jackson had just come off this big victory from a battle in our state in Alabama. And so he moved on to Louisiana and to the New Orleans area. And that's why Andrew Jackson, there are themes of him all throughout the city of New Orleans because he's well known for that battle. And so even though the war had already ended with the Treaty of Ghent, it was formally and officially ended, he didn't know. It's not like they could just call on the cell phone and say, hey, the war is over. We signed this. Don't worry about it. And so, that didn't happen. And so it didn't matter to the people because Andrew Jackson was such a hero. He had defeated the British. And then shortly after the Battle of New Orleans, word had come down that the treaty had been signed and the war was over. And so it just kind of correlated and overlapped that it looked like it was because of his victory, which was a victory. It was a big one, and he did defeat the British, but wasn't really the final, didn't end the War of 1812 as everyone thinks. Something else that happens in the War of 1812 is the British burned down our capital, which is horrible. It's just so sad. And so just not a good situation for us when that happens. It's very sad. The capital, capital buildings and capital cities are very important for not only the federal government, but for states as well, because that's where your leaders are. That's where your top officials are. That's where you make decisions, your legislative branch. That's where you make decisions. And so it's very, they always say if you want to take over a country, you need to take over their capital just because of how important capitals are to the country and to decisions and everything. So that did happen in the War of 1812. I have some other videos that I've uploaded that you can watch that talk about the War of 1812